It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
Take 5, it's the 5-minute edition of Take Command. I'm Craig Hoffman, he is Logan Paulsen, and we're going to spend 5 minutes on the 2-minute. Yikes, Logan. The end of this one, it just felt inevitable that the Seahawks were going to go down and score. But how did it ultimately happen, and what could the Commanders have done differently, / which they do differently next time? Let's buzz through it real quick. What did you see on this 53-second game-winning drive for Seattle?
I think now, like with how efficient offenses are, these 2-minute situations are they're almost easy, even versus good defenses. And I'm not trying to absolve our defense from not making a play here, but I just think like when the Commanders scored, so when Sam Howell throws that touchdown and they have 3 timeouts left, 53 seconds, and it's a field goal, like that's a drill that you work a ton. That even when I was playing, that was something you worked a ton, and that's easy. Those timeouts make it so easy because your entire offense is still on the table. So I knew that they were going to have a big challenge ahead of them, the defense, and obviously like they were able to get a couple chunk plays, which is not ideal in that situation. And, one of the first plays was the slant to DK Metcalf, and I think that play is a blitz that they ran probably twice in the game prior to that and had great success with it. And on this one, Seattle picks it up. The prior 2 times you get 2 awesome free runners to the quarterback. He has to throw it away. This one, picked up. St. Juste is, I think, in relatively tight coverage, but you're kind of expecting the pressure to get home because it's done that every single time. They're playing off, which again is something that people go, why did you play off? But when you're playing essentially zero coverage, when you're by yourself on an island versus an explosive receiver, I probably prefer that. I know Fred Smoot, I can hear him yelling already. I do a couple shows with him. He's always like, press, you only got to defend the slant and the go. But I kind of say, I look at the process on the prior 2 blitzes and I say, that's what they did before. I don't know why that would change now. I think the biggest difference is that the pressure gets picked up, and I'm sure St. Juste would say he's got to play better. So that's obviously tough. And then I think,
in fact, by the way, St. Juste did say he's got to play it better.
I thought he was talking about more the post on the 2-man look. That was the one. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously that's not great. But then I think the dagger in this sequence is the 2-man. That's really tough, man. It's 2-man. You've got everybody manned up across the board. There's 2 safeties deep, and they run like what I would call Seattle runs like a pull concept. So there's many variations of this, but essentially you have a guy, usually a tight end or a slot receiver, sit down at 5 yards to kind of pull that hook player down if you were in zone, and then you are running like an in-breaking route behind that player versus a corner and cover 3 or quarters with outside leverage. And so St. Juste, has got DK Metcalf man-to-man, and he kind of just stops on the in cut. And I don't really have a good explanation. He said that, I think you were reading this to me earlier, that he thought they were going to run the 7, which is good sound football thinking because they don't have any timeouts.
7's a corner route, so it's going, you break outside towards the sideline.
And, he'd been got on double moves a couple times earlier in the season, so it makes sense. You kind of run like a little fake dig and go to the corner. But again, like that's one of those ones where, he's probably got to make that play. And I understand his thinking. I understand his reasoning. It's all there. But ultimately, Seattle makes that play, and then, they have to center the football for the touchdown, basically, or for the field goal, excuse me. So that's really what it comes down to. It's, blitz doesn't get home, and then a guy who is thinking about it in the right way, if I'm being honest. Like, there's no timeouts left. I think the thing he underestimated was how much time was left on the clock, because you can get up to the football and spike it. But it's a tough deal. That's a really tough down and distance for him. And obviously he's going to get a lot of heat. And I guess rightfully so, because like you got to make plays in those situations. But yeah, man, that's ultimately, like, I would just say that is a really tough situation for the defense, having been on offense, obviously, my whole career, and knowing how I view that situation with those 3 timeouts in 53 seconds and just needing a field goal. It was a tough ask for the defense for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess a couple of simpleton questions here. First one is, why are those situations so easy? Like, if scoring points is that easy, right? Why isn't it that easy all game? Like, if it's so easy to drive the field and get a field goal, then like, why can't you do that all day long? Why does anyone ever punt? And obviously it's not like teams are so efficient all the time that in those situations they always get it.
Right.
But it certainly does seem like in the modern NFL that situation happens a lot. So why is it so easy, especially in those situations, to drive in between the 20s and get yourself into field goal situation?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good question, and I think I would say it's easy relative to other 2-minute situations, because the biggest enemy in a 2-minute situation is obviously the clock. So if you have 2 minutes left and you're after the 2 minutes warning, but you don't have a timeout, the offense, the dynamic, the paradigm of the offense changes completely. You're trying to call stuff to get out of bounds. You're trying to call stuff to find ways to stop the clock. Every play you're calling, you can't get too far down the field because you got to run up and spike the football afterwards. And obviously 2 minutes is maybe a little bit of an exaggeration. But let's say you had like a minute 25. It becomes really, really challenging to score there. But all of a sudden with the timeouts, you get this defense that is going to be playing probably a little bit more conservatively, and you can touch anywhere on the field. You can run, you can throw, you can attack the middle of the field, you can attack the sidelines, you can take vertical shots, and you only really need to get about probably 40 yards of offense, which, for Seattle in this game was not very challenging. But in those 2-minute situations, because of the space you're able to create, because of the fatigue of the defensive line, it just seems to fall in this really natural way of just being relatively easy. It's relatively easy to get that. And so, when Washington scored, I was like, they're going to get this field goal like almost immediately, because that situation is so challenging for the defense. What you really need is an explosive defensive play. So, turnover, sack is another nice one, or an offensive penalty is kind of what would stymie that. And, earlier in the game, I think Washington was able to get some of that stuff on third down. We're going to talk about their third down percentages and how effective they were in the main podcast. But in this situation, they didn't get that kind of, either offensive penalty, defensive stop, either tackle for loss or sack. And that's the result. So,
yeah, I look at that and I'm like, why can't defenses then just stop playing so conservative? And yeah, you might give up a big play, but offenses are typically going to try to run their 2-minute stuff. So, and they're scared of getting too far down the field. They're scared, you can't coverage bust and give up a touchdown. But I think that there's got to be a better way that is more cognizant of time and whatever. And that kind of gets to my other thing, which is the Fred Smoot point of why not press? If so much of this stuff is quick and timing dependent, I do think that pressing and disrupting the timing, and especially if you're blitzing, marrying your coverage and your pressure seems beneficial, and making things take longer in an area where the clock is the enemy. That seems to make sense to me on a very baseline level. Although sometimes that logic doesn't really hold up once you start to parse it apart.
Yeah, and I think so. Obviously, I think Jack was pretty aggressive in this 2-minute. He brought a 6-man pressure, and it's not zero, because it's kind of like a what I would call so instead of a 3 deep, 3 underneath fire zone, it plays like a 2 deep, 3 deep fire zone. So it's kind of this weird man zone principle in the back end with one less coverage player. So I thought that was pretty aggressive right there, and I think. To your point about pressing, that comes up a lot. And I think that the guys, St. Juste has a PBU, I think, on a slant the next play. I'm not sure if he's playing off. He's playing slightly off maybe. But he does seem to be a little bit more comfortable in a slightly off man position. And so I went back and watched all the other times they ran those blitzes in the game with you, and he's playing off, and so is Fuller. So obviously that's something that they feel more comfortable with in that situation. And I guess I don't really have a good answer as to why you would press there, why you wouldn't press, excuse me. But obviously, if they feel more comfortable doing it as a coach, I want them to do what they feel more comfortable doing. And I think the other thing is they got the pressure, they blocked the pressure up, and I think that's something that you're not counting on. You're bringing 6, you should be free to the quarterback, and they win downs too. And so, I wish we could kind of show you the clips, but the previous 2 times they ran that pressure, they get free runners to the quarterback, and it's a beautiful pressure, and there's nowhere for him to go with the ball. And here Seattle picks it up. And so in the most pivotal moment of the game, kind of the pressure that's been so successful for you, especially in the fourth quarter, just isn't there. And I think that's got to be a point of frustration, but ultimately they make plays too. And I think that's why that's a big point of frustration for me. It's a big point of frustration for fans, the coaches, I'm sure, but they get paid too, and they made a play there and when they had to, and it kind of got the drive started. And then obviously the other one we talked about was the post that St. Juste kind of said he was getting ready to protect the sideline. But yeah, I really think I thought Jack called it well. To your original point, I think he called it relatively well. It just didn't play the way you wanted to play. And you said this yesterday to me when we were talking offline about how at some point you just got to kind of make plays, and your players got to make plays, and this is an example of that. So
there's no scheme that is execution proof. You can call the perfect play, and if your guys don't go execute it or make a play or whatever, then at the end of the day, it's not going to work. All right, much more film breakdown on the full pod tomorrow. Thanks for listening to Take 5. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good, and then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 1067 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do it.
Very, very smart.